Welcome to another class review slash critique for 2019 Phantasy Star Online 2 Season 6. Today we're going to be talking about the ones you know and love, the Bravers. As far as the class explanation goes, there's not much to it. This is the first true time we got to see the combination of long range and close range damage via the katana and also the bullet bow, which just call it a bow. Save us the time and trouble. Anyways, a little bit of a history about this class. There isn't any. This is the first time this class has existed in any form of a Phantasy Star game, and I should know because if memory serves, I've played about 90% of them. That being said, it is obvious that the basis for this class is deep Japanese history because it's obviously meant to be a samurai. Now, as far as the weapon pros and cons, well, this is a case of beauties in the eye of the beholder because you could have 5 Bravers and I can promise you each one of them will utilize both of those weapons differently and might just reject the other one outright. But let's start with the katana because it looks cooler. The katana, besides being close range, is very unique and a lot different from what you would expect, seeing as how we've already had the dagger at this point and we also had obviously the giant big cloud strife type sword. The katana sits comfortably in the middle, but its damage output is almost on par based on how you do your loadouts with the sword and in most cases can surpass it. Obviously the sword had some recent upgrades, but let's be honest, up until then, if you weren't using a hero with the sword, big damage on a hunter by itself, soloing when this stuff first came out, not as fun as with a Braver. But I digress. The katana's primary abilities focus around doing charged special attacks or photon arts, SAPA. They're all the same to me. The way it works inherently is very simple. Once you activate the photon art, some of them will have a special ring around them, a crimson ring. Now, when this ring gets close to your character, letting you know that it's time to unleash some true damage, you could actually either extend your special attack or you could find yourself in a situation where, for lack of a better term, you just increase the range of it. There's no one set thing that these things all do. They're sometimes dependent on the photon art. In particular, one of the most famous / notable ones, because it's got the most invincibility frames, has your character literally holding the sword on its side, waiting for that red dark crimson ring to come in on the character, unleashing it, and as soon as you press any directional button, your character will change their direction or keep going in the same direction they were hitting the enemy in and do about 3 more slashes. The third one having the longest startup time, but also doing the most damage. Literally, there is no other class that does this, which is why a lot of people gravitate towards the katana. And now let's go into the bullet bow, or what I like to call Quincy mode for you Bleach fans out there. Rest in peace, Bleach. You will be missed. The bullet bow, as if it wasn't obvious, shoots arrows of energy. And of course, the photon arts also work somewhat similar, but drastically different from a lot of the other long-range weapons. The charge effect and ability for the bow does carry over from the katana, but it works very, very traditionally, for lack of a better term. You can hold down an attack to increase the amount of damage it does or the length of it, but that's about it. There's not really going to be directional changes or invincibility added to what you're doing, save for some few exceptions. There are 2 primary ways within your skill tree to modify this, and I know that skill tree comes up later in the discussion, but this needs to be mentioned early because it fundamentally alters your base attack. But within your skill tree, when it comes to the long range section, there are primarily 2 formats. There is increased charge damage, decreased charge time for your normal attack, or rapid fire normal attacks. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but again, like many things in this game, depending on how you spec them, they can mean a difference between raw damage output or raw photon art damage output and frequency of use. But yeah, we're going to get in skill tree much, much later. The bullet bow's primary techniques usually involve either separating the enemies or bringing them all together for them to be impacted by a much larger attack. The rule of thumb with the bow is the quicker the attack comes out, the less damage it does, and the longer the attack takes to do, the more damage it does. But unlike the katana, invincibility frames are few and far between, my sweet. You can get bitch slapped out of very, very powerful things. But theoretically, you shouldn't be up close in the damage if you're going to specialize with the bow. However, this is Sega we're talking about. So obviously there's going to be some long range enemies or people that can straight up teleport too. So you should never treat it as if you're magically going to get a win button if you just happen to be in a distance. Okay, so that brings us into our next segment, whatever you want to call it. Generally speaking, the pros and cons for this class are, well, they're somewhat mental, or rather, they're somewhat player induced. See, this class over time has been upgraded and modified to the point where you almost shouldn't be able to autopilot as much as you can with this thing. Hey, not complaining. I'm not asking for a nerf. I'm just saying it's real easy to not screw up with this class, especially in the skill tree. We'll get there later. I know, we're almost there. But long story short, as far as the pros for this class go, your ability to produce high-end damage with little effort on your part, or rather stack high levels of damage with little effort on your part, is almost second to none. There are skills on your hotkeys, not to be confused with your skill tree, but they come from there. There are skills you can put on your hotkey that are class specific that at this point in time have a built-in modifier if capped out, which increases your natural damage and crit odds, and in some cases crit damage by almost 20% of what it is as a whole. And let's be honest, I'm ballparking it and I'm minimizing it, so it can probably go a lot higher. For instance, back in the day, average stance, which weird name for it when you stop and think about it, which naturally increased your overall damage output, went from being on the hotkey to being a passive buff that is always on as long as you have that class as a main, and it could also be a sub. So that means that no matter what damage you give yourself, modify max, you want to add that extra 150% to it. Oh, it's just so fucking beautiful. I probably shouldn't curse, but hey, fucking beauty needs to be recognized. Anyways, yeah. Other than that, you also have your very special, I call it a limit break. I call a lot of things limit break, but your katana gear gauge is the technical name, but limit break just seems more accurate. Where not only does it let you home in with your normal attacks if you so choose, you can modify it with the ring to not do that if you want. But for a limited time, when that gauge is maxed out, you actually increase the damage that your photon arts do, much like with the Braver. But also, if memory serves, it adds an element of increased critical damage, which, hey, like I said, stacks on stacks on stacks, damage on damage on damage. However, and this is what I like about the 2019 iteration of this class and how they handled this situation, if you switch to the Braver, your limit break gauge, which caps out at 3, stops depleting, and the effects carry over to the bow. So theoretically, let's say for instance, your katana's damage or the katana you have natural attack power is dramatically weaker than your bow. I know from personal experience, not because I'm lazy with it, but when you get a 15 star, you usually can only focus on one at a time. So since I have a 15 star bow and I got my 15 star katana late, it's not maxed out or even anywhere near maxed out. So the damage output obviously favors my bow. But that doesn't mean I don't put on the katana to build up the limit break gauge to 3, activate my stance counter stuff, and then immediately switch over in the bow, so the bow also gets the damage and crit increases. Also, I'm just going to notate this again for those of you who didn't catch any other video, or this is your first video. Critical damage does not inherently work like it does in pretty much every other game that's ever existed, RPG or not, for Phantasy Star Online 2. It's not even like this in other Phantasy Star games. So critical damage just increases your odds of hitting the maximum amount of damage variable that your character can do with that attack or that photon art. Dexterity, on the other hand, increases and tries to lock in your damage output to match what your critical variable rate is. Again, that sounds really, really weird, but basically think of it like this. A critical attack has a guaranteed chance of letting you hit the highest amount of damage possible for your weapon and attack power combination. So for instance, if you normally do 20 damage, but your critical lets you do 50, your dexterity will increase your normal damage rate of 20 if you level it up a lot to that base level of 50. And what happens is critical damage boosters will increase your odds of your critical doing above that 50 cap you have as far as how much damage you can do. No, I do not know why it's like this. Sega likes fucking with us. I say that as a joke, but sometimes, holy crap, does it feel true. But on top of that, you also have a type of what I like to call subsonic or super slash attack. Now, once you turn on this meter, obviously it's got a long cooldown to it too. Your character gets a smoky aura around them, and it transitions from blue to purple or either blue to red. I want to say blue to red because that seems to be the motif with this class. And if you attack something, turning the attack on and off for a second time, your character does a slash. That radius is almost 4 or 5 times what a normal slash is. And once they put their sword in their sheath or hilt, it does an automatic guaranteed damage on whatever it hit by a multiple of whatever you have it maxed out to or capped out to on your skill tree. Told you skill tree is very important with this class, but then again, what class isn't skill tree intensive? Now, there is not a bullet bow version of this attack, which for some people may give you the incentive to utilize the katana over the bow. Okay, let's get into them cons. Very few and far between, thankfully. As I mentioned earlier with the differences between critical and dexterity damage for this game, the Braver tries to heavily imply and tell you without telling you, you want to max out and buff up your dexterity stat, because that dexterity stat can mean a difference between sometimes doing high levels of damage with your crit to making your base damage as strong as your base crit damage. Now, the con also has to fall into the player category, but it's built this way, so technically you could look at it as, it's a con based on how you are as a person, or it's a con because of how Sega designed it. Speccing out your class for both of these weapons is very labor intensive, time consuming, and it may lead to you doing underperforming damage for your level and weapon combination. And I'm going to be honest, I have, I think maybe 40 to 50 skill resets for your skill trees in my bank, in my player bank. I can promise you, I burnt off at least 15 of them through trial and error with the Braver by itself. See, a lot of people will tell you the katana does more damage, or they'll tell you the bow's better because you can stack better damage from a distance. But let's be honest, that's all player choice. If you want to use the katana because you like the fact that you get your limit break gauge and your super slash ability, and it's tailor-made for you and how you feel, plus it's a lot faster than the entire hunter class inherently, and with less weapons to mess around with, then a lot of people who play the katana will look at you like an idiot for even thinking that the bow is worth anything other than going in the trash. And obviously the opposite can and will be said for specialities into the bow. And they all inherently look at you stupid for trying to go down the middle road. However, remember, this isn't day one Braver. This is 2019 Braver. So it's a hybrid class, but the skill tree can actually conform to the hybridization if a player so chooses. And I know because I've been down every iteration of a Braver tree that there's ever been. So if you stat and max out almost all of the basic damage skills that go to the class, the katana, and the Braver, not factoring in any special buffs or changes like, rapid fire or, the stance stuff outside of average stance, always get average stance. If you don't have average stance max out, you're cheating yourself, damage-wise at least. It's easier to do. When the Braver first came out, the max level in this game was something around 50 or 65, which means that if you wanted to max out everything to make your character skill tree look like a complete hybrid, so you're good in almost every situation, you were going to come up short in every category. But now the max class is 90, and there is SP or skill point class quest that you can get that gives you an extra 5 or an extra 10, nothing gets in your way. Absolutely nothing. The true con that comes with playing this class as a hybrid is that there is no detailed list that Sega just hands you. Even though they have the automatic and the recommended settings, the automatic and recommended settings, and I've seen them for the Braver, don't actually adhere to hybridization like you would as a player naturally spec into. It tries to do the equivalent of a one shoe fits all situation, and that's not going to work. And I'm going to tell you why. Because on the bullet bow alone, there's 2 styles of it, plus the katana by itself. So really, you're fighting yourself in 3 different directions instead of what you inherently expect to be 2. If you use rapid shot, then you go down the rapid shot tree. You increase your damage for your normal attacks, and you also increase your crit odds. And if you go down the charge tree for your bullet bow, you actually decrease how long it takes for you to charge up your super powerful attacks. And you can actually shoot a little bit further, or actually a lot of bit further, with a fully charged up normal attack. And all of your charge attacks naturally do more damage. And I believe there's something on there that reduces the photon points amount that you need to do those special attacks. Don't quote me on that. I don't have it open in front of me right now. I don't speak and record the gameplay at the same time in case it wasn't obvious. I get footage and then I go down a special list in order of what needs to be talked about in relation to the class and the pros and the cons of everything out under the sun. So yeah, the cons to this class is that it's really, really inherently easy to mess up your skill tree. You can be punished for over-specking or under-specking, and if you try to focus on one particular weapon for your class, you will have an easy time filling out your skill tree, but you will run the risk of finding yourself in situations where you can't live up to the class's designation of being a hybrid for close and long range. It looks really awkward when people try to hit aerial enemies or bosses that can fly with a katana. I'm not saying it's not possible, it's just fucking awkward. And the damage output is dramatically decreased. Also, the fact that you have to activate your limit break gauge or your major stat boost mode by waiting on an enemy counter is technically a con. But I say technically because there are weapons and there are rings within the game that allow you to modify that to where you can just hold down the block button and automatically activate it. But again, that falls in the category of why is the shit not instant? If everybody else's is pretty much instant, with the exception of like 2 other weapons on 2 classes, why isn't this instant? But yeah, let's get into that tree. It's got a lot of skills. Okay, so you know it, you love it. Y'all want to get into it. It's not DMs, it's the ST, the skill tree. This time we're going to be doing things a little different because I actually remembered to copy paste or rather screenshot the entire skill tree list ahead of schedule. Now I just want to point out right now, I am not going to give you an exact example build. I'm just going to note some things that I feel need to be mentioned or try to help you avoid those common mistakes you can make when you get your first tree. Because even though we do get skill resets very, very frequently based on them changing something inherently on the skill tree or nerfing or buffing something, doesn't always mean that's going to be a constant, you know? All right, first and foremost, on the right-hand side, you'll always notice that the jumps and dodges are there. Please, for the love of God, if you're even halfway understanding of how this game's evasion system works, don't. Next jump is okay. Step jump combo, that's okay too. Step in general, that's good. Also, why does the game call dashing step? A step is not a dash. A step is the beginning of walking. What the fuck, Sega? Now, when it comes to your step attack, that's totally up to you. You'll basically do a little bit of damage when you do your dash, and the damage is not even worth it. And I mean not even worth it. Even at max level, you could be one of the strongest characters in this game or players in this game. That step probably never going to do past 100 damage. However, which is a little bit unique about this class, you can actually recover some of your stamina when you get knocked down simply by recovering. However, investing in this is completely up to you. Just don't expect it to ever go past 20% recovery. Now, in the case of high level bonuses, I can't recommend them enough just because, again, what did I tell you? Added passive damage. The trade-off is that you can only gain access to them once your class is at 85 or 90, as well as braver combination, which increases your, or rather, when switching to bullet bow while katana gear is active, your critical rate is increased and the katana gear state is retained. Only takes effect if you're the main class. This is the move, or the name to the hotkey move I told you about earlier, which isn't on the hotkey anymore. It's called Braver Combination. Unfortunately, you can't get it until late leveling, late in the game, but obviously, since you only got to invest one time into it, totally do it. Again, damage on damage on damage, buffs on buffs on buffs, stacked up. Dexterity still works how I told you it would, so obviously getting that high level, or at least near high level, is a very important thing. Not to mention, it gives you access to your branching paths on your skill tree in relation to the katana and also the bow. Of course, the stances go without saying. Average stance and weak stance are the go-to when it comes to damage. If you want to be more precise, instead of, focusing inherently, you want to go with weak stance, because weak stance lets you do more damage specifically to the weak points of any enemy you're fighting. But of course, the trade-off is you lose your damage when you get to the non-weakness points. However, obviously, over time, that buff is somewhat messed around with. Not to mention, on the skill tree is weak stance up and weak stance charge directly under them. Weak stance up, granting a bonus to damage attacks that are affected by weak stance, and weak stance charge grants a damage bonus to charge attacks that are affected by weak stance. So, realistically, it's up to you. There's even a weak stance critical. However, I prefer average stance because average stance is universal, and of course, the skill tree is fun as well. The average stance increasing your striking power and your shooting power, maxing out at 115%, but average strike up increases that damage on top of that, again, stacks on stacks. But then when you get to the final edge of it, the strike attack charge damage can be increased, and the strike attack critical odds or rate can be increased. So again, falling into that category of you're always making yourself do good damage. The katana gear, aka the limit break, is self-explanatory. However, I will say that using quick mate can mean a difference between life and death. But of course, let's get into those bows. Rapid shot, exactly what it sounds like, but it caps out at 3. So don't ever expect to upgrade it to go past 3 rapid shots in a row. And yes, it will increase your damage output if you go down this shoot up flow tree by about 600. However, that does not translate to photon art damage, and increasing the damage by that much sounds very, very good. But remember, this is a normal attack. So, not really in most situations. Now, my personal favorite, the charge shot tree, increase the power of your charge, normal attacks, and bullet velocity when equipped, meaning not only do you increase your odds of hitting somebody because you're shooting faster, but the power behind it is increased. Starting at 103, but capping at a 115 power increase. Now, the charge bonus, though, my personal favorite, decreases the photon consumption and charge time for your photon arts when equipped with a bullet bow. It's a 1 slot only. You get a 5-point reduction in whatever you're doing, and your charge time is reduced by 20%. Pretty short and sweet. That's why I like it. Of course, I'm not telling you how to spec out your tree. There's plenty of internet forums, Reddit posts, and synthetic skill managers for it. Just remember, your limit break is important because the higher up in levels you get, it'll start leaking over into powering up your bow as well. Because, you never know which 15 star or super strong, rare, hard to get item is going to drop for you first. The katana or the bow. Always try to be prepared. However, I'll just say this right now. If you want to spec into one thing in particular, why not just change your class into something else? Think about it. Oh, you only want to use the bullet bow because you like the range. Well, why not be a gunner braver or a braver ranger? Something that, suits your natural taste. And the opposite for a braver, pretty much everything else. Hero, no way, you can't mix hero, sorry. Have a phantom sub so you can use magic. Go get hunter, go get fighter. The blood weapons do a lot of work. Don't underestimate the blood weapons. Short and sweet and to the point. All right, now with that out of the way, let's just knock this out right now. Who should play this class? Well, this is one of the only situations where you're going to see something be completely newbie friendly, but also not as time goes on. So I can tell you right now, just because it snowballs into being complex, or it'll start off being extremely complex and technical, but then once you get used to it, it gets way easier for you to manage because you know what you specifically want to do. I cannot recommend this for new people. Yes, it feels good to have a hybrid, but hybrids are inherently technical. So let me just say right now, avoid this one if you're brand spanking new. Yes, it looks cool. Yes, you like katanas. But look, if you want to get close range but still also be able to shoot, Gunner. Gunner's main priority is the twin machine gun, which we already discussed, and you can move in and get a damage buff. It can use the rifle, but almost nothing on the skill tree suits it. If you want to really get in close, start with Fighter. Fighter, which we're going to go into eventually, don't worry. Probably a lot sooner too. I want to increase the frequency of when I'm doing this. Fighter lets you get up close. You still have the same blocking ability as you would with the Braver. However, the difference is it's more acrobatic. You can move around with it, and it shuts off when you touch the ground, but you could rapid press it, and you could do it multiple times in a row. Also, built-in homing attacks and better air use, which doesn't make sense. Why do daggers magically let you defy the laws of reality / gravity and be able to go and hit aerial enemies like nobody's business? But hey, it's Sega and it's fun. I won't even blame it on Sega. It's just fun to do. You played Bayonetta. You should be used to hitting things in the air with things that you shouldn't, outside of a gun, that is. So yeah, I can't recommend this to the new person. I want someone to at least have their base class or their class starter class closer to level 40 or 50 before they try to introduce Braver gameplay into their system. Or just keep Braver as a subclass and switch once you think you got a decent weapon, or you finally sat down after going through training mode and understand which you like more. Because what can make or break your interest or complexity in this class is deciding from the beginning if you're going to go hybrid, stick with the katana, or stick with the bow, or you don't know what you want to do. The last thing you want to be is close to endgame or at the midpoint, and here you are using a class and you're underperforming in all categories because you decided, oh, I want to start off being hybrid, when realistically your skill tree is not gonna like that too much, and you're almost gonna be penalized and punished for it. Moving on. All right, let's get into those high synergy class mixes, or classes that play well with Braver. Well, first and foremost, I will say off the bat, every single close range class is a good sub. Go get Phantom. Just go get Phantom. The first thing you'll notice is that the utilization of magic, even if it's underpowered, is restricted completely to somebody who at a bare minimum has a subclass that falls under magical or technical stuff. However, with the introduction of Phantom, that has been erased. Because Phantom naturally has high attack, range attack, and magic attack stats in its natural skill, not skill tree, but its natural stat buffs from leveling up. So, the highest amount of range and combination strike boost you can get for a subclass on Braver is automatically Phantom. These two go together like redheads and stepchildren. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist saying it again, but I digress. These two classes mix together like peanut butter and jelly. That is not to say that this is the best synergy that you can get. To be honest, I haven't seen too many people willfully mix Braver and Phantom, but the first thing they say is, holy crap, my attack boost and my range boost combined outmix and outclass any other class I could have had as my sub. Plus magic. Your own personal ability to heal or do elemental damage. The way I look at it, it's almost idiot proof. No, and I'll just say it, it's idiot proof. If you have Braver as your main and Phantom as your sub, you've pretty much idiot-proof your class, because all of your weaknesses that you could have potentially had by being a hybrid or having one weapon be stronger than the other, well, it's scaled up with how much boost you get from your Phantom. So remember, kids, you want to be a good braver? Level your Phantom. But I digress. Actually, no, that's not even technically right. There was no digression in that. However, if you're one of those people who have a weapon focus, you already know what I'm about to say. Go grab your Hunter. Go down that attack boosting natural skill tree because it carries over when it's a sub. Or go into your Fighter. However, keep in mind, the amount of buffs you will receive that inherently boost up your Braver Katana are far, far, far more diminished when you have a Braver Fighter. If anything, Fighter is better off being boosted by Braver, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. Don't worry, we will sometime. So yeah, if you a Braver and you all about that blade life, you go and grab yourself a Hunter and make sure the Hunter skill tree is heavily invested in the natural stat boosts and buffs that come with that class. Now, as far as the bow side, you already know what I'm going to say. Ranger or Gunner. Normally. But remember what I said. The Gunner skill tree, even though it has some range attack boosters, is inherently not meant to blend or mix well with anything that doesn't involve Ye Old Twin Machine Gun. So that leaves Ranger. Now, Ranger does have better natural attack boosters when it comes to range because it actually values them. But they also don't really give you that much option as much as Phantom. However, if you know that your original class you started with was in the gun family, it can never hurt you to synergize with them and have them be your backup. However, just for the sake of this, if you can't really invest in blood weapons, even though they can be bought in a player shop, which are the highest ranked universal weapons we really have right now, don't be afraid to have Ranger be your backup, or again, be a Braver Phantom, but none of your weapons are rifle based. You know? Just have the Phantom literally there to allow you to use magic and boost up your natural inherent damage. There are some things on the skill tree for Phantom that can benefit other classes, but realistically, the class itself is meant to be the booster, not what's on the skill tree. So yeah, that's pretty much it.